So today's Srimad Bhagawatam class is Canto 3, the status quo. Chapter 9, Brahma's prayers for creative energy. Verse 33, a beautiful verse. Really beautiful verse. Really, it's almost has everything in this verse. This verse is just like so amazing. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Yada Rahitam Atmanam. Yada Rahitam Atmanam. Utendriya Gunashayaha. Utendriya Gunashayaha. Swarupena Mayopetam. Swarupena Mayopeta. Pashan Swarajyam Richati. Yada Pasyan Swarajyam Richati. Yada Rahitam Atmanam. Utendriya Gunashaya. Swarupena Mayopeta. Ashyan Swarajyam Richati. Yada Rahitam Atmanam. Utendriya Gunashaya. Swarupena Mayopeta. Ashyan Swarajyam Richati.
Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Rupena Mayopetam.
Rupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajya Mrchati.
Asyan Swarajya Mrchati.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Ashyam Sarajam Richati.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajya Mrchati.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Darahitam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajyam Mrchati.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Yadarahitam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajyam Mrchati.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Yadaritam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Bhutendriya Gunashaya.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Asyan Swarajyam Mrchati.
Yadarahitam Atmanam.
Yadarahitam Atmanam.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Bhutendriya Gunashayai.
Swarupena Mayopetam.
Sarupena Mayopetam.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati.
Asyan Swarajyam Richati. Yada. When. Rahitam. Freed from. Atmanam. Self. Buddha. Material elements. Indriya. Material senses. Guna ashray. Wait. Am I pronouncing it's Ashayahi? Is it, or how is it?
The way we were told in the Sanskrit school is that when you reduplicate the sound for the H with the dot underneath, when it's a short syllable, then you reduplicate that sound. When it's a long syllable, then you revert to the closest short syllable. So I becomes he.
So he, okay, Gunashayahi. Okay, I was saying it wrong.
I used to say Shayai Hai, and then I was corrected that it's not reduplicating a long syllable.
Okay, Gunashayahi. Under the influence of the material modes of nature. Swarupena. In pure existence. Maya. By me. Upetam. Approaching. Pashan. By seeing. Swarajyam. Spiritual kingdom. Ruchati. Enjoy. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. When you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies And when your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. Repeat after me. When you are free, from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, when your senses are free, from all influences, of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form, in my association. Capital M. Which means Krishna's association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. I mean, just think of this. This is, the Lord is speaking to Lord Brahma. This verse is so beautiful. The Lord is speaking. He's saying, my association. So this verse is direct instruction to Lord Brahma. He's so fortunate that the Lord is speaking right to him. Purport. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that a person whose only desire is to render transcendental loving service to the Lord is a free person in any condition of material existence. That service attitude is Svarupa, or a real form of the living entity. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita also confirms this statement by declaring that the real spiritual form of the living entity is eternal servitorship to the Supreme Lord. The Mayavadi school shudders at the thought of a service attitude in the living entity, not knowing that in the transcendental world, the service of the Lord is based on transcendental love. The transcendental loving service is never to be compared to the forced service of the material world. In the material world, even if one is under the conception that he is no one's servant, he is still the servant of his senses, under the dictation of the material modes. Factually, no one is master here in the material world, and therefore the servants of the senses have a very bad experience of servitude. They shudder at the thought of service because they have no knowledge of the transcendental position. In transcendental loving service, the servitor is as free as the Lord. The Lord is Swarat, or fully independent, and the servant is also fully independent, or Swarat, in the spiritual atmosphere, because there is no forced service. There, the transcendental loving service is due to spontaneous love. A reflected glimpse of such service is experienced in the service of the mother unto the son, the friend's service unto the friend, or the wife's service unto the husband. These reflections of service by friends, parents, or wives are not forced, but are due only to love. Here in this material world, however, the loving service is only a reflection. The real service, or service in Svarupa, is present in the transcendental world in association with the Lord. The very same service in transcendental love can be practiced in devotion here. This verse is also applicable to the Jnani school. The enlightened Jnani, when free from all material contaminations, namely the gross and subtle bodies, together with the senses of the material modes of nature, is placed in the Supreme and is thus liberated from material bondage. The Jnanis and the devotees are actually in agreement up to the point of liberation from material contamination. But whereas the Jnanis remain pacified on the platform of simple understanding, the devotees develop further spiritual advancement and loving service. The devotees develop a spiritual individuality in their spontaneous service attitude, which is enhanced on and on up to the point of Madhurya Ras, or transcendental loving service reciprocated between the lover and the beloved. This is such a beautiful verse. The first thing I wanted to ask is, what is the symptom of the soul? I was listening to Roma Pad's Maharaj give this class, and he had a conversation with a minister, and he was asking, what is the symptom of the soul? And yes, consciousness. Anyone else? Well, Prabhupada says that yes, consciousness, but it relates to feeling and action. So the symptom of the soul is conscious feeling and action. So that was really interesting. He was talking about this conversation with this minister. So as a feeling being, as a person who feels, it behooves us to really pay attention to the Lord in the heart, to hear from the Lord in the heart, to feel what the Lord is telling us. And in the very beginning phases of bhakti, one has Shraddha. If you look at this beautiful chart here that's been made by Janti Mala, beautiful devotee who lives in Vrindavan. She's made this lovely blossoming of the Bhakti Lata Bij. And Shraddha, for Lord Brahma, he was sitting on the lotus flower, and what was he doing? First he looked outside of himself, and then he looked inside of himself. He was veritably all alone. He didn't have any distractions at all, no distraction. He had to listen, and then he got the mantra, tapas. He got that first mantra, tapasya, tapas, tapas. So he took that seriously, and he withdrew himself, and he began to perform penances and austerity. And from there, for we devotees, faith is the beginning phase. It's the very seed. I know as a very young child, I was asking things like, can you explain eternity to me? You know, it's, I could understand that the soul had this aspect of spirit has this aspect of eternity. And so I wanted to understand eternity, but it's kind of difficult to understand eternity with the mind. Kind of hard to wrap the brain and even the words around the word eternity. Something that is ever existing. You know, that's a simple definition of eternity. But we see in the process of our own lives, creation is taking place, maintenance is taking place, and then destruction is taking place. So in the material world, there's these aspects of creation, maintenance, and destruction. And Prabhupada teaches us about maintenance, that everything is within the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is within him, and he's maintaining everything. Even in his yoga, when he's resting, everything is resting in him. So for the devotees who are having faith and they want to inquire from some place, they want to ask questions, just as I did as a young child. Who do you ask? You ask your mother. And Prabhupada said the mother is the Veda. Mother Veda teaches us who our Father Krishna is. So we inquire from the Vedic scriptures, the source of all knowledge, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what we need at that point is the association of devotees. Here Lord Brahma was in a unique situation because he was alone. So his spiritual master was Krishna personally, directly. He's practically, even Lord Krishna had a guru. Even Lord Krishna, he set a proper example that we must all take a spiritual master. He went to Sandipani Muni's ashram and he took instruction. But Lord Brahma, he was in this unique situation because he was the first created living entity. And Prabhupada tells us, if there is no one qualified to take the post, Krishna expands himself to take that post. Just as Krishna could expand himself to become all the cowherd boys and all the calves that Lord Brahma stole, so everything goes on naturally. Everything will go on because everything is within him. Nothing is separate from Krishna. So we are so fortunate. We have Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha is so very important. It is the most important thing in devotional services, good association. Getting the association of those people who are fixed in and determined in consciousness to speak about Krishna, to vibrate about Krishna, to exclusively share Krishna consciousness. Not get into prajalpa, not get into fear-based rhetoric that's temporal, not get into this, like here lately we've had such extreme polarity of COVID consciousness. And it's divided us. It's divided us even as a spiritual organization. It's divided us. You know, and this isn't, we should not let our consciousness go to the prajalpa of fear-based rhetoric and simply focus on Krishna Leela. Associate with those who will tell us, what is Krishna doing now? That's why we have these beautiful artics in the temple. They're meant to celebrate what Krishna's Leela is, what he's up to now. Like Raj Bog is celebrating Krishna and the cowherd boys in the forest eating all kinds of delectable things. Luchi, Chini, Sarapuri, Ladu, Rasavali. It's like beautiful, beautiful pastimes of Krishna and the cowherd boys eating lunch, and maybe some of the cowherd boys are stealing Krishna's lunch. Or Krishna saying, oh yes, yes, and the cowherd boys are saying, hey, you have Ladu, you have Laddu, you have samosa, can I trade something for my lunch kit? You know, so he's got all these delightful things in his lunch kit. Even Srila Prabhupada said he was going to the spiritual world for Laddu and Kachori. So, so for the devotee, they're discussing these things, the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if somebody starts talking to you about something worrisome, temporal knowledge, help them by bringing their consciousness back to what is Krishna doing right now? What is going on in the spiritual world? What is going on in the eternal pastimes of Krishna? Not this tiny speck of an earth that's whirling through this universe at how many thousands, 100,000 miles per hour, and just at this particular 2-year period, we've got some kind of so-called pandemic thing. No, we don't need to worry about that. Just like the cowherd boys, they're simply very, very innocently, they see Aghasura's lip in the clouds and they smell his hot breath, and he says, Krishna will save us. We're very, very, the idea is to have confidence and enthusiasm and devotional service. We don't need to be foolhardy, of course, but we shouldn't dwell, because even Prabhupada said, if you see an atomic bomb, you should say, Krishna has come. Maybe it's going off. Krishna. What do we say in any case? Krishna. Say it with me. Krishna. In any and every case, the best thing to say is Krishna. So simple, and listen to how beautiful it sounds. Krishna. Again, Krishna. Oh my gosh, Krishna. 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 He's the most beautiful being and the most beautiful pastimes. And everything about Krishna is absolutely gorgeous. What do we need? I'm an addict of beauty. We don't need anything more than Krishna. Everything is about Krishna all the time. We don't need more than that. So for one who has faith in Krishna, they won't be deviated. That's like firm root. Here you see the root is there. It's deeply rooted. Deeply rooted. That faith is deeply. And then association with devotees. We only want to associate with those who will remind us of Krishna. If someone's going to take us away from Krishna, we will, I'm caregiving my Mataji. I've got a deity of Krishna in the living room. She says he's smiling at her. And I have Bhagavad Gitas planted and other little deities all over the place to always remind her of Krishna as much as possible. Feed her prasadam. And gradually, she's softening up a little bit. In the beginning, when I would try to preach to her about you're not this body, and that's really what is right here in this verse. You're freed from the conception of gross and subtle bodies. And when your senses are free from the influence of the modes of material nature, we have to know, I'm not this body. But generally speaking, in this material world, we are really, this is us. We think that this is it. And I'm dealing with my Mataji, who's very much 90, thinking she's 90, thinking that she's this material body. And she didn't even want to hear it when I was saying to her, Mom, guess what? Isn't it super awesome? You're not your body. Nope, don't want to hear it. She literally said, I'm not ready for it. Not ready to hear it. This verse is telling you, when you are free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and when your senses are free from all the influences of the modes of material nature, senses, Prabhupada gives us the perfect process. Our senses are engaged in service. What their senses are engaged in making these lovely garlands for the deities. Our senses are when the deity doors open up, Jai Panchatattva. Our senses are, oh my goodness, look at how beautiful the deities are looking. Our senses are, wow, isn't the prasadam fabulous? So they're becoming spiritualized. So it's not an artificial thing like we're withdrawing our senses, but we're placing them on transcendental, in a transcendental way, engaging them transcendentally. It's not an art. You don't just like detach and don't reattach. No, you reattach them to Krishna Prasad, you reattach them to Sadhu Sangha, you reattach them to Panchatattva. We're attaching our indriyas to transcendence. And Prabhupada's given us such a wonderful process. We wake up in the morning, we bow down, we pay obeisances to our spiritual master. We thank the Lord for another beautiful day in devotional service. So we engage the indriyas away from material nature and engaged in the pure, in pure consciousness, transcendental consciousness. And from that point, we get purified. We become firmly fixed in steady devotion. We don't want to deviate. We know there's nothing else. We become firm in this process. And so we're elevating through this situation. We're no longer, it's saying that we're getting rid of anarthas. Those anarthas, obstacles from our past sins. It says that at the time of initiation, that fan of sinful activity, the plug is pulled. It's still spinning. There's some residual spinning going on. And also the obstacles from past pious deeds, like even the mode of goodness can be hampered. I'm good, I'm doing all this good stuff, I'm going to get all these pious credits. That can even trap us, that we have to take birth again so we can enjoy. We can become a demigod. But what good is that if we're not becoming Krishna conscious and get off this whole vicious cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease? We want to become freed by the freedom of the regulative principles, the freedom of devotional service, the freedom of becoming understanding our eternal constitutional position as servant of Krishna. So once we become freed from these even the pious deeds, and we also get freed from devotional service that I remember in Vrindavan after a certain number of years, there, people were giving me a lot of respect, and I was getting worried, like, oh, am I doing this because I'm getting respect? Pratista is an obstacle. That fame, adoration, and distinction, that is, if we're doing our bhakti to get that, big, giant trap. So that is devotional service that's improperly being performed for the wrong motive. We're not giving it up. It's like we're taking the consolation prize. You know, that we're getting this fame, adoration, and distinction. Haridas Thakur, he didn't worry about that. He was beaten in 21 marketplaces. And he still carried on chanting the holy name. They tried to entrap him with a prostitute. He still chanted the holy name. He was so firmly fixed that whoever came into contact with him, they became devotees. It wasn't that he was influenced by them. No, they were influenced by him. Jai Shri Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai. So there's 5 other obstacles that we start to become free of, and that's drowsiness, distraction, incompetence, contaminated consciousness, and the taste for material pleasures. I notice myself, even when I'm chanting my rounds, there's a certain amount of, you're in this clearing process when you chant your rounds all at the one time. And you get to the point where your to-do list comes up, and then the last bit of it is like, finally the name is all there is. So it's almost like daily we go through this kind of launch into Krishna conscious. Like I say, Kartik of the day is Mangal Artik, where we can come and sing and dance and get the most spiritual advancement in the Mangalam, in that beautiful Muhurta, an hour and a half before sunset. It's just a special time for spiritual advancement. And if we can get that going, that take advantage of the timing is so important. If we take advantage of the time to make spiritual advancement, when the atmosphere is clear, the roar of the city has subsided, the ether is light, and we can launch our rounds more effectively. And then that drowsiness we're freed from drowsiness, we're freed from the restless distraction of the mind, we're freed from incompetence, we're freed from a contaminated consciousness, and we're even freed from material pleasures, a taste for pleasures, because we're getting so much pleasure from serving the deity, so much pleasure from being in the association of devotees. So we come to the platform of unshakable resolve, of Nishta. Nishta is a wonderful place, and to associate with devotees who have unshakable resolve. They're not wavering, they're not tempted, they're deeply rooted in the sadhana bhakti process. They're addicted to the sadhana bhakti process. It's a wonderful thing to get the association of devotees that are such addicts. It's a wonderful thing. Are there any questions?
I wanted to share, Raghu is in the hospital in Hilo with the COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear
He's
that.
struggling.
So let's say a prayer for Raghu. Let's chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh my, he's had such misfortune with his material body. And this is one of the things, the Adi Boitik, it's like Adi Atmik and Adi Daivik. These material sufferings are, and when we are firmly fixed in Nishta, and we're not in the conception of I am this body, or I am this mind, if we're firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness, that suffering is mitigated. So let's pray for his pure devotional service. Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Jai. Sarida Vichajal, Jodindriya Taikal, Jive File Vishaya Sagare, Tarmaji Vayati, Lokamoyasati, Take Chita Putana Samsare, Krishna Bodhi Doya Boy, Kodi Kodi Chivi Saprashadam Tila Bhai Sanyam Ritapa Radha Krishna